Hong Cheng-ye. I'm one of the students of the course, The New Deal, Politics and Culture, and this is my vlog project, which topic was the New Deal Coalition. First, we needed to look at the 1932 election. This election was held during the Great Depression, and laborers were the biggest victims during the Depression. They were unemployed and unpaid, becoming the major force to vote for change in this election. Two major parties nominated their nominees. The Democratic Party choice was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, known as FDR, who was the governor of New York. The Republican Party nominated Herbert Hoover, who was the former president, and as you can see the results, FDR easily dominated in this election. And why the choice was the Democrats and FDR? Luckily, Democrats has a pro-labor tradition. They call for regulation on economy, unions, and social securities. By contrast, the Republicans has a pro-business tradition. They are supporters of free market and no regulation on economy. And why FDR was so charismatic? First, his campaign slogan was "Happy days are here again." He wanted to remind voters that the golden era such as 1920s will be around the corner if they elect him to be the president, and the tough days will be over. Second, he brought about a economic reform named New Deal. The New Deal wasn't a concrete conception during the days in campaign, but the voters really want government to try something to end this depression, because what Herbert Hoover had did was shake his hand off. He had said that given the chance to go forward with the policies of the last 8 years, we shall soon, with the help of God, be in sight of the day when the poverty will be banished from this nation. Third, FDR really had great confidence. As his speech in his inaugurations, he had the famous sentence that he quoted: "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," which give his voters promise that FDR is ready to solve this problem. Are you ready? As FDR became president, his New Deal became more and more clear. The New Deal was imitated from FDR's uncle, who was the president of 1904 to 1908, Theodore Roosevelt's Square Deal. The Square Deal has 3 C's, and the New Deal has 3 R's. The 3 R's are relief from poverty, recovery of the economy, and reform of the regulations. As you can see the New Deal programs, the short terms are programs of relief. The medium terms are programs of reform. And the long-term programs are regulation programs. New Deal really caused economy prosperous. As you can see on the GDP side, the New Deal was effective since Franklin Roosevelt was voted as president since 1932. The GDP was growing upward. And at the unemployment side, we saw the unemployment rate soar the summit in 1932, and after the New Deal, the unemployment rate steadily go downward. Owing to FDR's popularity, he became the star of the Democratic Party, who was able to catch support from different style of voters. At first, the force which dissatisfied the major two parties in local politics have a great power. Sure, a wealth platform from Huey Long, the Louisiana governor, and those local progressive parties have become strong during the Great Depression days. But however, New Deal actually worked economically, so FDR gains a lot of support. The traditional supporters are the white Southerners. FDR promised to postpone civil rights issue, although his First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt has big influence on civil rights issues. Urban workers, farmers, and labor unions were the traditional supporters of the Democratic Party since William Jennings Bryan held the populist movement in the Democratic Party. And also the immigrants, which are Roman Catholics for big numbers, are the major supporters because the Republicans are supporters of the pilgrims. And also FDR catch new supporters. First, here are some liberal Republicans who supported him because some of the New Deal acts were regulated since Hoover administration, and they think the Democratic Party fulfilled these acts and became the party of prosperities. And the socialists also support FDR and the Democrats because the prosperity actually reduced the inequality in the economy. And after Norman Thomas knows in 1932, there are no socialist campaign for president in the FDR's era. Third, this was the most surprising, the African Americans, because New Deal addressing economic issues that were important to African Americans. They have better incomes during the New Deal programs were involved. And by 1936, only 28% of African American nationally voted for Republican nominee Alf Landon. This is less than a half of the number who had voted for Herbert Hoover just 4 years before. The fourth was Jews, because there are about 30,000 and 30,000 Jews were found refugee in the United States. The number was nearly 1/4 of all German Jews, and this marked a dramatic reversal in the image of president who won more than 80% of the Jewish vote in all 4 of his successful campaigns. The last word was human, because Eleanor Roosevelt was an active figure of feminism, and at the past, women often vote for the Republicans for the prohibition issue, and now prohibition issue was over, and FDR really boosted the economy, so they think that FDR was the better choice for them and their husbands. There are difficulties of the New Deal coalition because as FDR became more and more success, some of the conservative became more and more concrete. They built a conservative coalition. Some of the Southern Democrats were worried about the civil rights issues that were proposed by FDR. They think that one day FDR will change his position during the civil rights issue. Second, the conservative Democrats, such as Al Smith and even his vice president of two presidency, John Nance Garner, had become his opponent because they think that FDR wanted to pack the court. Because the Supreme Court has announced that some of the New Deal programs were unconstitutional, and FDR really wants new Supreme Court justice, and he tried to pack the court. And these Democrats are afraid of that become the dictatorship of FDR. The third are the opponents Republicans, such as the senator of Ohio, Robert A. Taft, for example. He didn't really want Democrats to hold the liberal voters, and he called for a conservative coalition. This is a coalition for winning the election. And fourth, there are American Liberty League, which was formed by businessmen of General Motors and DuPont. They think that FDR was too radical and socialist, that he was so pro-labor that the businessman will not able to become the dominant of the working position. During the 1932 to 1968, this was the success time of the New Deal coalition, owing to the great charisma of FDR of get rid of the Great Depression and led the victory of WW2. The Democrats dominated both President and Congress during this time, which became the fifth party system for the political historians. And during this time, every president has his own New Deal. After FDR dead, the Vice President Harry Truman became the president, and he proposed the Fair Deal, which was a more progressive idea than New Deal. Also, there was a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower. He was still proposing his New Deal for interstate highway system, spending monies to build a highway system that covered all the United States. And then the presidency got back to the Democrats. The JFK was elected for the president, and he had brought about a New Deal program named New Frontier, which want to reduce tax and make the economy more prosperity. And at last, that is LBJ, which was called for Great Society. This is the ultimate form of New Deal. LBJ was the last inheritor of FDR. At 1964, the Democrats controlled 2/3 seats in the 98th Congress. They won 68 to 32 margin in the Senate and 295 140 margins in the House. OBJ really wants his great society when nobody in this country is poor. He announced a war on poverty. He brought about job crops and education to the poor, health cares, customer protections, conserve natural resources, and the most important, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that the African American was finally equal to the to become the American civilian. And 1960s was the collapse of the New Deal coalition, primarily owing to the Vietnam War. LBJ has failed his war on poverty project, and the WPA failed to provide manufactured works because of the economic downturn that Keynesians couldn't solve, that the conservative blue-collar voters have changed their ideas. They held city riots and make the city security really bad. So some of the companions in the 1960s of the Republicans called for law and order. And second, the 1964 Civil Rights Act made the Southern Democrats really unsatisfied. That LBJ was a Southern Democrat, but he decided to advocate the civil right for African Americans. So they became Dixiecrats. They wanted to have their own nominee in the election. And finally, the New Deal coalition collapsed because two of these major forces leave the Democratic Party. The Republicans used the Southern strategies, which wanted about the votes of the Southerners, like using the law and order issues and the racial issues. And we can see that even though LBJ wants a dominance in the 1964 election, the solid South, which used to be the Democratic Party's region in South, became the supporter of Barry Goldwater, who was the nominee of Republicans. And as the Vietnam War became worse, the whole country was not supported for the New Deal coalition. Nixon calls for law and order and pullout in Vietnam successfully make the New Deal coalition fallen. And here are my references. Thank you for listening.